We're ready. All right, now I have 6:31. Welcome to our May 12th Governing Board meeting. Mrs. Hahn, call to order, please. Present.
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 Here.
And she is calling in, so we're waiting to hear from her. All right, Mr. Nielsen, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, do we have a motion on adopting the agenda? If you'll notice, there is a change. We moved the action items up right after call to the public so that Mrs. Knorr could call in and participate in that.
I'd like to I move that we adopt the agenda with two changes. One is to move section 3 back to its original place after item 7, given in hopes that Mrs. Knorr can join us for that.
So you're talking about action items?
Yes.
After 7.
Does that make sense?
Oh, so that we could allow more time.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And then also to remove item 7F from consent.
Okay. Okay, well, Mrs. Knorr is the one that requested that action items be put up at the front. All right, any comments? I mean, I prefer it the way it is, but we have a motion. Is there a second?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I just have one question. Mrs. Knorr requested that the action items could be moved up
Correct.
so that she could call in, correct?
Correct.
I don't see a problem with moving it back then. I'll second.
Okay. And also pulling 7F off consent.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so that takes us to our call to the public. I don't have any speaker cards. Is there anybody out there that would like to speak? I know it's spring break. Everybody's probably in California. All right, seeing that there are no comments, let's move on to our superintendent's report. Dr. Chestnut?
A few things to report on tonight. Spring sports are well underway, and I know softball team did very well in the last tournament, so some good pictures from that event right there. And Sydney is not here tonight, so we will go on to our budget committee update. Jim Irving and Rick Nielsen are co-facilitating, and I know Rick has some information for us.
Good evening, President Anderson, members of the board. I'm going to apologize in advance. All of a sudden, my voice is not cooperating too well, so bear with me, please. Pardon me? Oh, yeah. As you know, the Budget Committee has been meeting. We've had very strong turnout at the 3 meetings that we've had so far. When I was here at the last meeting, I told you it was a little premature to bring a list, but we were in the process of prioritizing various items. Aaron Rausch and his staff provided us with many of the numbers that we needed to fill this out. So what I have this evening are the 3 areas: the critical, which is the first slide. We'll go through that real quick, then essential, and then things that are desirable. One of the first things is, as you know, many of our staff have not been on track, have not been on track with their annual step increases the last few years because of budget cuts. And so one of the most popular items, I would say, in our discussions was the staff pay and the need to do whatever we can to try and increase those levels. The committee pretty much unanimously felt that we needed to support at least an annual step increase, and then if we can, an additional step that would be towards making up depending on the classification, anywhere from 3 to 6 year difference that people have had their pay frozen. That is the largest amount so far. Restoring all-day kindergarten, I know that you're considering a proposal from Dr. Chestnut and staff for that very same thing. The committee discussed this and the scenarios that Dr. Chestnut has brought forward to you. They felt that going with the smallest class size scenario, the ratio of 1 to 24, a cost of about $150,000 was what they would like to see. General class size reduction across the district, adding 10 teachers at the discretion of Superintendent Chestnut and his cabinet and the school principals on where those best be placed. Maria Saparelli felt that because of the continuing growing number of special education children that the district is receiving, that she sees a critical need to add 5 additional resource teachers next year. Again, it's hard to say at what level and where, but just overall population. Mental health support for our students. We've had a large number of 911 calls relating to attempted suicides, suicidal thoughts, other mental health related things. Hearing from counselors and teachers that they're overwhelmed with the number of students, and so they're looking at 3 positions. This dollar figure was kind of hard to nail down, but we're looking at about $70,000 per psychologist if that's the way it decides to go. Expand foreign language either at the middle school or high school level, possibly sharing a teacher between the schools, looking at 1 additional staff member there. Our elementary schools do not have assistant principals. Some of them do have what we call TOSAs, teachers on special assignments, that kind of fill in the assistant principal role as far as student discipline and mentoring. The committee felt adding at least a part-time TOSA at each elementary school to help the principal with the day-to-day management and security of their campus. Increasing security at the high school campus by adding an additional security position there. Currently, there's 3 full-time security staff at the high school. This would bring that up to 4, which is where we were pre-cuts. And the population has gone higher at the schools.
I just want to add to this that many of these recommendations, especially when it came to the staffing, was based upon the Meet and Confer Committee recommendations as well. And so this is coming directly from the staff's input. So a lot of that is really what helped.
Yes, thank you.
How many SPED teachers do we currently have?
Honestly, I don't know.
And thank you, Mr. Beckett, in advance.
Can we get that answer back to you at a later date?
You bet, no rush. Another question, Mr. Nielsen, as it relates to the salary increases and additional compensation at various levels. Was there any discussion about merit pay or performance-related pay, or is it all just across the board?
There was some brief conversation as alternative, scenarios. I know Mr. Roush was looking at how other districts are starting to reconfigure and stuff like that, but it would not be something that could be put into place for the next school year. There's not enough advanced time was kind of the thought process there, and so we kind of went back to the salary schedules that we have in place right now.
Thank you.
Okay, so those, what the committee felt were critical items total about almost $2.6 million of the increased revenue that we're anticipating for next year. The essential items, adding in certified library staff. These are positions that we had previously at our elementary schools and middle schools. They've gradually been reduced to paraprofessionals that don't necessarily have that specific training. They're looking at 8 positions throughout the district. Increasing custodial staff, their recommendation is 6 positions, again, district-wide. Expanding fine arts instruction, primarily music, art classes, art history, art appreciation type classes, adding 3 positions there. Transportation department expressed their need for an additional coordinator for scheduling of buses and field trips and that type of thing. Mr. Walbrecht has been working on just a general technology upgrade. Every conversation we had kind of kept going back to technology. The best estimate we had from Mr. Walbrecht was approximately $900,000 as of Friday of last week. This would be either upgrading or replacing aging computer labs and other infrastructure that's not necessarily covered under the OCCHIN grant, as we're using that for other technology upgrades. We have schools with computer labs that are 7, 8, 9 years old, and they can't keep up with the flow with the current testing, and we're worried about Park and that moving on. Mr. Roush felt that there was a lot of maintenance projects that were deferred during all the budget cuts, and he felt that probably about $200,000 a year going into the future to get those back on track. So these essential items are totaling $1.9 million. Desirable items, these are our wish lists, if it were, if we can find a way to get them in, or we find some additional revenue. The high school up until this year has had after-school transportation. It was for student athletes, it was for tutoring, for students that were attending clubs and that type of thing. That was cut for this year. Mrs. Salaya had indicated that it did not have an adverse effect on participation in athletics, but she has seen a dramatic decline in the number of students staying after school for tutoring and other academic needs, as well as the clubs and other activities that we want the kids to engage in. So that's why it says non-sports. We're also looking at adding the same type of thing for our elementary and middle schools so that they can have after-school activities. This would probably be, maybe 1 or 2 afternoons a week type of thing. Right now, when staff are out, they go to a computer system called SubFinder to request a substitute. We were given feedback that not always are these jobs filled through the automated system, and that there's a need for a person that can actually follow through on these calls to make sure that the positions are filled. Mentor teacher stipends, the idea behind this is to take our very best teachers and pay them extra to either work after school, give up planning periods, conduct weekend sessions or whatever with our newer and struggling teachers, so that we can get them up to speed as fast as possible. And it's a common practice in a lot of areas. School level funds for academic focus. This is something that I believe Dr. Cheston is already working on in his budget. It's at the desirable level right now only because it really didn't get voted on where to put it. It was an oversight on our part as the facilitators of the committee. I fully expect that that's going to jump up to the critical status at our next meeting. The same with the depositing into our reserve fund. Mr. Roush felt that $300,000 was the minimum amount that should be deposited for that rainy day type thing. So both of those things we do anticipate will probably move higher up on the list. The subtotal for the desirable items is $1.4 million. So here's just a summary. So the critical is about 2.6. Essential items about 1.9 million. The desirable items at 1.4. The estimate that we were given by Mr. Roush as far as additional available funding for next year was approximately 3.6 million. So right now we're overextending by about 2 million, which is the process. This was our first pass through, seeing numbers. Some of the items we didn't have numbers yet. So our meeting next week will be fine-tuning this. And then we were also asked by Dr. Chestnut to try and make next week our last formal meeting so that we can get a recommendation to Dr. Chestnut to formalize a recommendation to the board sooner, so that any of these new positions that we're recommending, if it's decided to do that, that Mr. Beckett and his people will have ample time to start recruiting before a lot of people are hired and no longer available. And that's all I have. Any other questions?
Mr. Bartle, 39 special education teachers, district-wide.
I have a question, actually just some information, I guess, for Dr. Chestnut or the Budget Committee. On your critical list, you had put down 3 social workers. Have we checked with the Pinell County Health Department yet, since they have an office here, if they would be able to provide a social worker once a week, or what other agencies were in the area that would provide social services for us? Okay.
That's a good point, yeah.
And because they're here, they have an office here, even if we offered them an office once a week and they were, started the process.
I know Mrs. Wyant is in contact with them
Yeah.
on other things on a regular basis, and she's my office neighbor, so I'll
Just a thought,
bring
because I
that
know
up to her.
agencies that I work with will provide that service.
On that subject, though, Marilyn Wyand is working with Phoenix Children's Hospital about the possibility of a mobile van, kind of like our mobile clinic van. And then there was one other avenue that she was working on, and it has escaped me at the moment. But yeah, we're working on that issue.
Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you to Rick for that overview, and committee's been a good committee, a lot of good discussion, and appreciate Patty serving on there and Anna Marie. So we hope to, as Rick said, finish up these priorities at our next meeting on the 19th, and then we'll have one more meeting after that. We hope we can wrap it up, one more meeting after that to talk about, are we going to recommend that an override be placed on the ballot in November of 2014. So moving on to other information, on February 27th, we had a rapid responder meeting with Maricopa Police and Fire Departments, and Heidi Rattle, is our professional development director, but one of the things that she does is she helps coordinate student safety stuff, and she and I both work on that, but she does a lot of good work in that area. And one of the tools that we have is something called Rapid Responder, which is really an electronic map of every school in the district, and it's a good tool for law enforcement and fire. And it's been a year or so, I think before I came. So it's been at least a year and a half since we've revisited this issue with police and fire. So we had a good discussion, and both agencies have some new people. So it was a good discussion to talk about that tool and how we can better coordinate efforts and work on school safety together, and had a good discussion about the planning for the 2 additional school resource officers that we'll have next year, one at Desert Wind and one at Maricopa Wells. So several good things in the works there, and it was a good meeting to have. Appreciate Heidi making that happen. On March 3rd, that was a Monday, Tori Anderson and I attended the Arizona State DECA Conference administrator lunch, which was fun to do and see all of our DECA students in action. And these were some of our finalists, our students that did really well, and very proud of their efforts. It's quite a conference. In case you haven't heard the stats on this conference, it's the Arizona DECA State Career Development Conference. It was actually March 2nd through the 4th at the Phoenix Convention Center. 2,600 students, 108 different high schools from around the state. Maricopa High School had 24 competitors, and 11 advanced as finalists. And if you're a finalist, that qualifies you to go to the International Career Development Conference, which is held in May in Atlanta, Georgia. And we have 8 students that are planning to attend that. So Bernadette Rusinello is the advisor, does a great job with that program, and it's a great learning opportunity for our students. So the students in the picture are, from left to right, Gretchen Lauterbach, Nicole Troyer, Amber Isbrandt, Sydney Akers, Christian Palafax, Alea Turner, Daniel Hersey, and Alex Seddon. So those are the finalists that will be going on to Atlanta, and that's a great thing for them, and we're proud of their efforts. On the 5th, had a parent coffee here in this room. Had 2 sessions, one at 10 in the morning and one at 7 at night, and really had a pretty good turnout. Had about 11 people in the morning session. That doesn't sound like a lot, but for a morning session, it's pretty good. And about 20 19 or 20 in the evening, and we covered budget, kind of an overview like Rick just did, although it wasn't quite that detailed because we didn't have all that information. And then we talked about the academic focus process. A lot of good questions about academic focus, how is it going to work, and that kind of thing. So that was a good discussion. And last Monday, 2 days ago, Tori, Patty, and I attended Arizona School Board Association meeting at their office, and then made a visit to the legislature. And it was my first opportunity to go to the Capitol and go to the ASB office, so I enjoyed that. And we'd hoped to see some debate on the Empowerment Scholarship Act. It was scheduled for that day, and then it was postponed. So, very important issue for our state and public education, and it would be very damaging, I believe, to public education if it passes. But we had a good visit and enjoyed it very much. Today was a big day at Central Arizona College. It was the Exemplary Women Leaders Luncheon, and we had a nominee who happens to be in the room. Krista Roden was one of the nominees. This was a luncheon that was held at all the different branch campuses of Central Arizona College and recognizing exemplary women leaders. And so Krista does a great job as our Director of Teaching and Learning. And so it was by invitation only, and Krista and I were invited. So it was great lunch, and Delia Carlisle gave the keynote speech, and she's a very good public speaker, and she has some great stories, and I enjoyed that a lot. So very proud of Krista, the good work that she does, and it was fun to see her get recognized for that today. Here's something else that's kind of interesting. On March 26th, you can attend a webinar called Chromebooks in the Classroom, Why They Work for Education Everywhere. And there are 3 speakers. I only listed 2 of them up there, but one of them happens to be Jack Walbrecht, who is our MUSD Director of Technology. Also, one of the speakers will be Jaime Casap, who is the Google Global Education Evangelist. And I'm pretty sure he lives in Phoenix. That is a unique job title, but when you work for Google, you have unique job titles. I've heard him speak a couple times, and he is an excellent speaker. He's the kind of speaker that speaks at state and national conferences, and that's where I heard him. And so I think it's a real honor for Jack to be on that webinar, and it is free. And we're doing a lot of work with Chromebooks, making good use of them in our Blended Learning 20+1 program is one good example. And so I know that Jack will be reflecting on that. So just proud of Jack for being involved with that. We think that's a cool thing. And that is all I had to report.
All right, that brings us to governing board member reports. Absolutely.
Since that first slide popped up, I'm just excited as can be. I just would like to announce our newly crowned Miss Ak-Chin, Danon Peters. She is a senior at Maricopa High School. She is a recipient of the Most Valuable Player for the varsity soccer team, and she is an officer for the Ameren Club. And I just want to announce her new crowning, and I want to congratulate her. Oh, one more thing. She is also the daughter of 2 proud parents, Cecil and Rachel Peters, who are graduates of Maricopa High School as well. So she's a second-generation student with MHS. Very cool.
That is cool. I remember having her in kindergarten.
Now,
Not that I'm aging myself, but she was a great kid. She still is. All right. Anybody else? Yeah, the Monday was the legislative kind of a lobby day going down there, and the only thing I want to do is make sure parents and staff and everybody understand that we need to watch House Bill 2291 very carefully and House Bill 1236 very carefully as they apply to education empowerment accounts. So take a look at that. You can go to azsba.org, click on the advocacy tab, and find out what that means for public education. It's very important that we get involved and take back our public schools. So that's my only thing I'm going to say on that. Mr. Bartle, anything? All right. Moving on, information work study. Dr. Chestnut?
Tonight.
Moving right along. All right, consent agenda. And remember that item F has been pulled off. So that would be 7A through E.
move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so that brings us to our action items. Let's go right to 7F first, which is approval of the second and final reading of the revision of the Governing Board Policy G5900, resignation of professional staff members. Mr. Bartle, you had some questions on that?
No questions. I asked this to be removed from consent because in the first reading, I voted against this item and would like to have the opportunity to do so again.
Okay. All right, so we have 7F as second reading. Are there any motions or discussions?
I move to approve 7F.
I'm going to second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries with one nay. Okay, that takes us back to our action items, which is 3A, Mr. Beckett, our HR schedule.
Thank you, President Anderson. Members of the Governing Board, Dr. Chestnut, you have the personnel schedule in front of you tonight, and I am willing and able to answer, hopefully, all your questions about it.
Mr. Beckett, I just have one question. We haven't sent out the contracts for next year. These are just teachers that are resigning that they know that they're not going to come back. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
That was my only question.
I have no questions.
Okay, so do we have any?
Turns out I should have loaded up on the stipends.
Right? There's no stipends on there.
All right, any motions?
Move to approve the HR schedule.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
3B, discussion and possible approval of free all-day kindergarten for the 2014-2015 school year. Dr. Chestnut?
At our last meeting, we talked about this, and we found out that we are able to use Move On When Reading funds to pay for kindergarten teacher salaries this next year, and we could not plan on doing that this year. And so that makes enough difference, $235,000, that depending on the class size that we can choose, it becomes very affordable. And my recommendation would be to approve the move to free all-day kindergarten at all 6 elementary schools. And then we can make a final decision on staffing as part of our budget package, waiting for the recommendations from the budget committee and putting those pieces together. That would be timely to do it then. So that would be my recommendation.
Dr. Chestnut, I have couple concerns. I know that when we brought this up last time, my concern was, are we sure this isn't going to take away from smaller class sizes or hiring teachers in the upper grades? And I don't see its address. I know the money's coming from Move On When Reading. Is that guaranteed? We're not going to have to go back and pull money from somewhere else. It's already been approved.
Right. Once again, it kind of goes back to what class size target we want to go for. And so it would be possible to have large class size and have zero cost, have it be cost neutral. If we want a smaller class size, we'd hire an extra teacher, maybe 2 extra teachers, maybe 3, and that's the decision point. And that's why I don't think we're ready to determine what class size we want now. That is, I think, be part of our whole budget package. So my guess is, like Rick just mentioned, the budget committee would like to see smaller class size in kindergarten. And so they're recommending we hire 3 additional teachers and get that class size down to, I think it was 26, I believe. Was it 24? That sheet's in the packet here. I don't have it up on the screen. But, right, that would be roughly where we could end up. That would be ideal. And I just think it's premature to know if we can do that now. And I think we have to wait and see how it balances out, which is kind of what your question is about. Tori, how does that look on a K-12 basis?
I mean, at the sacrifice of putting 45 kids in a secondary class, I'm not willing to do that.
All right.
So that's my concern.
The Move On When Reading funds will for sure have the 235 for that?
That's what the projection is, yes.
So is that formula based on the number of students enrolled?
I believe so.
Okay. So that could fluctuate.
depending on the number of students in K3, I believe is how it's allocated,
Okay.
which would help with being less, fluctuating less. If it was just based on one grade level, then yes, you might have more of a fluctuation.
Okay.
I like the idea of being able to go back to all-day kindergarten at no cost to parents. I think that early education is important. I just want to make sure we're not sacrificing our older students. That's my only concern.
I think this helps older students as well. The class sizes, of course, is a direct relation to our budget. And I see, in addition to the academic factors involved in having all-day kindergarten and the service to families, this has a positive impact on our enrollment, which has a positive impact on our revenues and gives us the ability to hire more teachers in that regard. I think that when we put ourselves in a competitive disadvantage by not having all-day kindergarten, and those kids are starting their academic career elsewhere, it is very, very, very difficult to get them to come back to our schools, and their siblings the same way. So I think this eliminates one reason why folks would not want to go to Maricopa Unified School District to get their education.
Okay, any other?
It may have been answered when Board Member Coutre asked if all of the children were enrolled, and this is factoring in the auction kids as well, correct? Okay, okay, thank you.
How does that affect the Action Grant?
Yeah, the auction grant has some language that funds can be moved in around if we underspend a certain category, so the funds would go into the technology budget.
Okay, any other questions, discussions, motions?
I move that we approve to have free all-day kindergarten in the year 2014-15.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 3C, approval of Maricopa Unified School District gifted scope and sequence. Mrs. Roden?
Good evening. Do you have any questions?
I have an open-ended, or just a,
Okay.
but maybe follow-up question for later.
Okay.
In looking at the scope and sequence, I see there's a lot of things that I'm not seeing carried out in the classroom. What's the plan for getting these teachers trained to be able to teach on the 3 different levels and offer different levels of the same lesson plan to students? Because I saw that across the board in all of the scope and sequence. What's our plan for implementing that? Because honestly, I don't see it right now in our school.
Step 1 would be to identify that teacher and put those students within that cluster, and then target the professional development toward that teacher, which I don't think we've done. I don't think we've done enough to support the gifted students or teaching differentiated instruction to that level of students, so you are correct.
I agree.
So this would mean that there's no pull-out program?
Not at this time. In my,
Elementary kids would remain in their classroom,
correct.
so
And
they wouldn't ever be put together with the other gifted?
the gifted students would be
in
clustered
their
together
classroom.
within their classroom. I do have it on the budget request. I did put on to add a gifted teacher, and then we would go to a different style of model where they would be clustered together based on school location, depending on the numbers of students and where they land up per grade.
So
And
when you say that, that means a pull-out program?
that could be a possibility, yes.
Okay.
So this is building the foundation to get that program up and running again.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I-
It's part of the Arizona Department of Education cycle for monitoring, and it comes up every 6 years.
That's all I
No,
had.
that's it?
It was very
All right.
clear. I mean,
Okay, thank you.
all right. Do we have any more discussion or motions?
Move to approve.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, that brings us all the way down to item 8. Do we have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It is 7:06.